So I actually work very closely with our enterprise customers, and I hear all these stories, the scary stories, pretty much every day. So I will be discussing a lot of bad practices that are adopted out there, and I'll tell you how to solve them and what is the right way to do it, right? So let's start with the scary stories that I wanted to tell you from the CSP street. So I'm pretty sure you guys have deployed or touched CSP, the cloud service provider, AWS, Azure, GCP, and you know when it comes to networking and security, it's not easy. From the outside, it looks like an easy button, but when you go inside, you peel the onion and then you realize that these clouds are not a magic, right? They do have their own share of outages out there. So how do you actually survive those outages? This is the topic that I want to cover today. So I'm pretty sure every morning when you wake up, you go to your favorite news channel or your social media, and you see these type of news pretty much every week. AWS region going down somewhere, GCP having a major outage due to a quota management system or whatever the case may be. Azure has their own set of issues and problems, right? And the reality is that the business that we are in, we are running the software, and these outages are going to happen. So the important thing to remember is how to mitigate or how to avoid those outages, right? So that's the important thing. And this is exactly why we have Aviatrix as the trusted advisor for a lot of enterprise customers helping solve these major problems. Because you don't want to be in the situation where the outage happened, you have some link going down somewhere, you don't have your backup plan or your DR strategy, and then you're losing the business. That's not the right way to do it. That's not the position to be in, right? So like I said before, we work with hundreds of customers. We have done thousands of deployments, and we know why these outages are happening and how to mitigate them. Obviously, the list is very long. I cannot cover each and every outage topic here, but over the period of time, since we have been in the business for 6-7 years now, we know there are 3 major buckets where we see these outages coming from. So the number one is the architectural problems. So when customers are deploying their cloud networking and security solutions, they're not adopting best practices. They're not adopting a right architecture, right? So in the process, they're creating fractured design without any visibility, no repeatability. That's the number one cause for those outages that you encounter in your cloud deployments. The second one is about the complexity of these deployments. Like I said, when you see it from outside, it's an easy button. I'm going into the cloud, it's all rosy. I'm going to deploy my workload, life is good. That's not the case when you're talking about the enterprise mindset or you're coming from the enterprise networking point of view, because these cloud and security constructs in the cloud are limited, they're complex, and they're not very easy to adopt. And that is what we see as the second reason for these outages. The third one is the CSP underlay issues. Obviously, CSP is basically giving you a data center or hardware for rent. So using it as a service. They have the hardware cables there, the routers, the switches, the load balancer, and whatnot. And they do encounter failures that can cause a regional issue or could be just an AZ-related issue, the availability zone issue. Regardless, whatever the case may be, these problems are out there. So the architecture actually takes care of that. So this is the good news for you, because you can mitigate and avoid some of these. Okay, so let's go and take a look at those one by one. So how do you actually eliminate those architectural gaps? So in order for us to discuss that, we have to go back into history a little bit. Okay, so if you have been in the industry for 20 or 20 plus years, you know when the data centers were deployed, they were all deployed on a physical infrastructure, and the main vendors were Cisco, Juniper, and Arista back then. And then industry evolved, and then we had the virtualization concept. So initially, VMware came up with the compute concept. Then they adopted something called SDN, software-defined networking. With their NSX platform, they started virtualizing those networking constructs. But the main point to remember is that everything was on-prem under your control, right? And second thing to remember, and I think this is the most important one, is that this was slow. This is slow, right? I still remember when I was in Cisco, it took me like 3-4 weeks, I would say, just to get a VLAN provision, right? So this is how slow it was, and it still is. So what happened, that business obviously wanted the agility, the momentum, so they started deploying their applications in the cloud. And in the process, they created this architecture gap because they did not follow any best practices, no proper design, and now it is causing a lot of problems for those enterprises. Okay, so obviously, when you look at this problem, which is the lack of architecture, it's creating a lot of nightmares and outages. And the most important thing, again, is that it's the non-operational model, right? How do you actually run it? How do you govern? How do you provide the auditability, visibility? And this is also we will cover in detail when Jen is talking about those constructs or those problems. Okay, so what is the solution for this architecture gap, right? So the Aviatics is the leader in the networking and security space, and we have given our industry this multi-cloud network architecture, which allows our customers to build a proper architecture in the cloud. So the first thing that you need to remember is the Aviatics controller. That is the brain of the solution. That's the virtual machine or EC2 instance you deploy from the marketplace. It's available in pretty much all the major marketplaces out there. And you only need one highly available controller to drive the entire interaction across multiple clouds. So that's number one. Number two is something called the Aviatics gateways, right? So this is the advanced gateway that we provide as part of this platform that allows our customers to embrace and extend the cloud networking constructs. Right? So this is providing the advanced networking and security, and it's also allowing our customers to build a proper hub and spoke architecture with a proper notion of access, the core, and application. And then you will also see security and operations as another pillars for this architecture. Right? So this picture is showing only one cloud, but the beauty of this architecture is that this is a standard repeatable architecture across multiple clouds, right? So with the same highly available controller, you can actually deploy this architecture across multiple clouds. And then the third piece is very important that actually ties it back to the proper visibility and control that you need for your enterprise. So when you have this Aviatics Copilot, it's actually providing you this enterprise-grade multi-cloud operations and visibility for your single cloud or multi-cloud needs. Okay. All right, so we talked about the architecture. You know how to build a proper architecture using the Aviatics platform, but there are some design pillars that are important to remember or to consider, right? So I'll start from the left, bottom left. So the first one is availability, right? So when you're building this architecture, your platform should allow you to create a highly available network, right? So that should be active because so that you're utilizing all the resources effectively. And it also be self-healing, meaning that if some link goes down somewhere, you don't have to worry about it. The architecture or the design should be able to cater it automatically. The second one is manageability. Very important to manage it, because when you're deploying something, it's a one-time deployment, you have done it, but you have to manage, control, and monitor it for the lifespan. So it's very important that you have those design pillars or the thought process behind that at least, right? The third is the performance. When you're designing something, obviously performance is very important. Throughput is just one angle to it. You also have to look at the application performance itself. If the business that you are you're solving or you have there, is it giving you the performance that you need or not? Right? So the application performance is also very important in this space. How do I recover if something goes wrong? something bad happens. The CSP outages that I spoke about, right? If a CSP is having a bad day in your region or your AZ is completely down, how do you actually recover from that? So you have to have proper disaster avoidance and recovery mechanisms or playbooks in place. Security is extremely important. I mean, it's one of the design pillars. You saw it was part of the architecture, but also as part of the design pillar, because this is how important this is. And the last but not the least is the cost optimization, right? So cost optimization means that you're not only saving the dollars or euros, but you also have to look at it from the time saving perspective, from the automation perspective, because you want to avoid those human errors. That is actually a huge cost saving for customers. They can quickly deploy our solution with a single Terraform and destroy if they need to. Okay, so that's what you need to think from the architecture and design perspective. Now, moving on, let's talk about how do we actually avoid those complex and limited native networking options, right? And how do we actually recover from CSP and delay issues? Okay, so when you look at it from outside and you look at multiple clouds, these clouds are providing you networking and security constructs, but they're very basic in nature, right? And the problem is that all these constructs are actually different. They behave and work different from one cloud to another, right? For example, if you look at AWS, they have a notion of AZ, but it's very different in Azure if you look at it as compared to AWS. When you go into GCP, it's again a very different concept. It's a global VPC concept there, right? So this is different. If you look at VPC and VNet in different clouds, again, very different, very difficult. It's not easy to follow, to be honest, right? Connectivity to on-prem, they have their services there, but you have to know a lot in order to just spin it up, right? So there is a skill gap problem out there that is also causing these outages. Because if you are not educated, if you have not learned it properly, then you will deploy something which is suboptimal without thinking about all the adjacent technologies and services, and you can easily cause outages. So it's very important that you educate yourself. So I'll give you an example here from AWS, but this is applicable to all the other clouds, right? I cannot go into the details of each and every cloud. You should talk to us. We can discuss more about other clouds, but this is just from the AWS perspective. So if you look at AWS, let's say you have a region 1 and you deployed a bunch of VPCs with TGW, and then you have connectivity to on-prem, you will notice that there is no control plane. You have to individually manage each and everything. And when you actually come to the routing side or networking side, you will notice that there is limitation when it comes to advertising the route towards the on-prem, or if you're getting routes from on-prem and trying to propagate them into respective VPCs, right? The intra-region TGW peering is not even possible. So if you are operating in one region, if you want to deploy multiple TGWs, you cannot connect them, right? Overlapping IP is a serious problem. They don't support it, simply, none of the clouds. So what will happen if you are acquiring something, a new business, or a partner is trying to connect to you and there is an overlapping IP? There is no solution, right? Some important BGP attributes are missing when you look at it from the routing perspective, right? Everything is manual, right? So routes are propagated here to TGW, but that's it. Now, in order for you to do some meaningful routing and provide the holistic routing, you have to manually go into the VPCs and modify themselves yourself, right? Security is another thing. It's basically, there's no notion of policy-based segmentation for your VPCs. When it comes to deploying these firewalls, it's active standby in most of the cases. If you want to do active-active, then you are talking about the source NATing and ECMP running the BGP on top of IPsec, then you are limited to 1.25 GB throughput. So that's not good, right? When you look at encryption, these connections are not encrypted. So these are the serious problems that can actually cause outages in your network. An outage means that it's not like CSP went down, but you receive a route from on-prem that is beyond what AWS can support, and then AWS will silently drop it, and that will could create a massive outage, right? So you have to think it from that angle as well. When you look at this visibility, that can also cause outages because these are like black boxes. You don't know what's going on in there, right? CSP region failure is a reality. I recently dealt with a very nasty customer case in Asia Pac, where due to GDPR, this fintech can only operate in one single region, Hong Kong region, right? So, and if that region goes down, what is your DR strategy? You have to have another cloud so that in case something goes wrong in the region, in AWS, at least you have Azure or GCP or some other cloud, OCI, to take care of that, to take care of at least your critical business, right? So you need to think from that angle as well, right? So with Aviatrix now, we are providing the solution. So all the challenges I mentioned before, even more, are being solved if you have a proper platform like Aviatrix, if you're following a proper architecture with proper demarcation in place, right? So now with this architecture, you're getting a true unified control plane, right? A proper advanced data plane. The encryption is there by default, so you don't have to think twice. It's there as part of the architecture. It's repeatable in single cloud or across multiple clouds. The routing is deterministic. You have multiple paths available so that in case one path goes down, the second is automatically there. Self-healing nature I was talking about before. The overlapping IP is solved with this architecture. The performance is maintained, right? It's not limited to 1.25 GB when you enable encryption in the cloud native world. We give you the line rate throughput or performance. We can segment these VPCs according to your business needs. Right? This ingress security, egress security, that is all policy based with the zero trust approach that we provide as part of this platform. The next generation firewall insertion becomes like piece of cake now, right? With the proper policy, with the proper ingress, egress, east-west, north-south traffic inspection you need with the policy-based approach, right? And also the connectivity to on-prem is part of it. Regardless if you have direct connect or you have SD-WAN vendor, we have solution for all that, right? The automation is holistic. You're not dealing with the cloud formation in AWS and something else in GCP. It's a unified automation plane now with the Terraform provider that we have, right? So these are the things that you need to do in order to avoid those outages. And if I extend it to multiple clouds, the beauty is that everything I said before is applicable here. So all the advantages that I showed you before in single cloud are now applicable with the repeatable architecture. So you don't have to do anything extra, right? You have your single Terraform, which is like the same. So you will still issue the same commands and it will just deploy across the board, right? So this is the beauty and architecture that we are proposing to our customer so that you have this highly available architecture in place. So in case, for example, this link between these two clouds for some reason goes down, you have the backup path automatically available with the advanced routing capabilities we have, okay? And last but not the least, that all the native services that you want are still supported with this architecture. So we are not taking anything away from you, okay? All right, so this is going to be my last slide. And just as a key takeaways, what you need to remember is architecture is very important, right? So you need to have a very well-defined and executed architecture in place, a multi-cloud network architecture. Even if you're in single cloud, you should be ready for multiple clouds, right? So that's number one. Number two, leverage multiple clouds for high availability to avoid those failures, CSP failures. You need to do that, right? Because you need to have this availability all the time. Constant evolution. Things are changing really fast. Cloud is moving really fast. You need to be up to speed. Whatever you have learned a year ago or 2 years ago is not applicable anymore. You need a trusted partner, trusted advisor like Aviatrix to help you because we are learning every single minute, every single second, and we are adopting really fast. The pace of innovation here at Aviatrix is really, really fast. So you need a platform like Aviatrix so you can actually be on top, basically. You're not behind, because otherwise your competitor will surpass you. So we have this A certification, which is amazing track to educate the masses out there. Regardless if you're a business owner or if you're an IT owner, the track actually fulfills all your need.